No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to talk about surveillance.
Ooh, I like this. NSA, FBI, they're probably tapping the podcast right now.
I hope so. Maybe they can learn something. I saw an article recently about how 1/3 of employers actually use live camera feeds to monitor their employees. And I thought, that does seem higher than I would have guessed. Clearly there's monitoring that gets done on remote workers, but I don't want to necessarily talk about the sensationalism of like, oh my gosh, you might be being watched on camera. I want to talk about more so why this is a hot topic and has been since kind of the work from home movement has moved forward, because I think there are, a lot of employees out there who have been in remote jobs for many, many years, long before COVID, who are looking at these measures and going, well, yeah, that's been my reality for a long time, right? Mm-hmm, yep. And there are also a lot of people who are in remote or hybrid positions now, who were in office positions, who think they weren't being monitored before, and why that might be the case. And so that's kind of what I want to unpack here is how we got here with regard to this topic, and what can be done about it from a leadership perspective to make sure that everybody's kind of aligned on what this means for each person in an organization, regardless of what the level of monitoring or surveillance is.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic for us to discuss. I think I know I've spent a good amount of time talking to people that have transitioned into either work from home jobs or have shared their experiences and that type of thing. And yeah, I think that for those that have been done it for a very long time, they're used to it. Like, of course, there's got to be a way to know that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing if you're working from home, whether that's logging into a system, whether that's tracking what you do on the work computer, whether that's for some companies having a camera turned on at all times, like whatever it is. I think when people sign up for some of those jobs, like these are just parts of that type of work environment that many people were used to. I'm not saying it's like right, wrong, or indifferent. I understand that there's definitely a need for tracking productivity. But I also understand that there's also like kind of a line at some point where it's like, how much is intrusive? And I guess it also depends on the person. Like if you signed up and said, okay, I agree to this level of kind of surveillance on the work that I do, then you agree to it. And, that's kind of what it is. It doesn't necessarily make it right, but it's a thing. I think those that may be new to it or have transitioned probably have a lot more questions about it. But I mean, like, look, you and I grew up in retail, right? We didn't call it surveillance. I think we called it like observational behaviors, position to notice, right? Job shadowing. These are all great terms that sound way better. But at the heart of it, that's kind of what it is like it's keeping an eye on making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. I look at, you bring up retail as the example here. I mean, I remember working on a retail sales floor as a teenager, and there were cameras in the building. Right. And we, as employees, we knew they were to prevent theft. Right. But there was no one sitting in a room watching the cameras all the time. It was, if there was something that needed to be watched, then they may go in. So if an employee said, hey, there's this customer who's shoving things in their jacket, then the loss prevention person or whatever would go sit and they'd look at the camera to see what was happening. And but if there was an issue where an employee was just not doing anything for, consistently all day long, just walking around, not talking to customers, not stocking shelves, just kind of like hanging out and not doing anything, and they were to be held accountable for that, do you think they wouldn't go look at those cameras and say, look at it, we were able to go back and look at the last 3 weeks and notice that you didn't talk to a single person for the entire 3 weeks. That's an extreme example, but again, it wouldn't be looked at as monitoring, but more validation for an interpretation of a result. And so you don't, monitoring, people think about it as intrusive, almost like there's a person sitting there going, I'm going to catch this person doing something wrong. And in the vast majority of cases, it has to start with the results aren't where they need to be. Well, now let's go back and figure out why. And that's regardless of whether it's a work from home or a non-work from home, like an in-office role. If I think about like in a completely office environment, you have cubicles and offices, and if I have 10 people reporting to me, I might walk through the office multiple times throughout the day. And if I notice Lorenzo's not at his desk I've never seen him at his desk the entire day. By like the fourth or fifth time, I start thinking to myself, did Lorenzo come in today? Or is that, that's essentially monitoring. It doesn't feel like monitoring because you're just going about your day as the leader, walking through the building, and then you notice that Lorenzo's not at his desk all day, and you start to wonder, is Lorenzo there? So you send a text message, or are you here today? Like, oh yeah, I'm in a meeting in another building. That's where I bet. Oh, okay, no problem. That's monitoring. That's there's no difference between that and monitoring somebody working from home. It's just the way that it is done has to be different because you're not physically there. And if you're doing it the wrong way, it feels intrusive. If you're doing it the right way, it feels no different than the situation in the office.
As you were talking through that example, I was like, man, this is like the plot of the Matrix. And like in this example, I'm Neo. Like I'm not at my desk.
Mr. Flores.
But no, you're absolutely correct. I think that that there's always going to be an element of like you sign up for a job, there are job expectations, there's going to be follow-up, there's going to be observations. If you work in a call center, you're going to have somebody sit next to you and listen to the calls if it's for customer service or things like that. Like there's these things that are going to happen to validate the proper behaviors. And I think that's important. Like that's needed. I think that a part of leadership is exactly that. Like connecting and checking in with people, and whatever you want to call it. But a big part of that role is just the validation of like, are people doing what they're supposed to be doing? I think it's easy to say, hey, that's surveillance. It sounds very, very kind of like cool, hot topic, type of thing. But it's a part of the work. But I think, and probably where we can spend some more time talking about this from a leadership perspective, is like, if this is a part of the job, and this is really the part of most jobs of leaders in a lot of different ways, how do you make it so it doesn't feel that way? How do you make it so that people understand that there are expectations, that there are behaviors that leaders are asking them to do, but not feeling like it's like aha, gotcha moment, right? Because again, like, are we trying to solve for like the real solution here, which is whatever that thing might be? Are we solving for something that helps with productivity and efficiency and effectiveness, or are we just trying to like gotcha moments with people? And I think that's probably what we can spend some time talking.
Right. Yeah. So I think about a good analogy I think of is, if I were to be, driving, if I'm driving on the freeway and there's a police car on the freeway, I'm going to slow down, right? And I'm guessing the desired result is that people drive the speed limit because it's safer to drive the speed limit. If a police officer is on the side of the road, sitting there with the car right on the side of the road, and they're standing next to the car and they have the radar gun aiming at cars coming by, I'm also going to slow down. I see him a half a mile away or a quarter mile away, and I slow down. And if the desire is, hey, there's been accidents in this location, people need to slow down, you get the desired result. Take that same situation, but the cop is behind a bush, like reaching up from behind the tree. Well, now is the desired result to slow people down, or is the desired result to generate revenue, right? Mm-hmm. One of them catches people, the other changes people's behavior. And I don't want to get into a discussion about what's right or wrong when it comes to that particular situation, but when it comes to the relationship between employee and employer, it is very clear what the right way to do this is. It's to be out in the open. It's to make sure that they understand what is being looked for. It's to make sure they understand why you are there to begin with, and what the desired outcome is. If the desired outcome is to catch a thief, you hide the cameras. If the desired outcome is to make sure that people just don't try to steal to begin with, then you don't hide the cameras, right? And it's the exact same thing when it comes to employee productivity and surveillance, however you want to call it. The employee doesn't. They will feel like it's surveillance if they feel like someone's trying to catch them. They will feel like people are trying to help them get better if it is positioned in a way that it is trying to help them get better. And if you are very open with them about all the ins and outs of whatever that surveillance process is.
I think it's a great point. And I think that, in retail, right, there's a big part of this that when it comes to validation of behaviors, it all evolves around customer service, whether you're selling something or fixing something or answering questions or training something. These things come to life in the retail industry. And I've always thought it was interesting to say, if you want to do an assessment, if you want to, our tagline says no role plays, right, on the podcast. But in real life, guess what we do?
Role plays.
Role plays, right? Yep. Because there's this element of practice. And there's two ways that you can go about doing that as a leader. I can say, hey, Chris, we're going to role play about your ability to do this behavior. Okay, good. So see you tomorrow at 2:00. We're going to do this, whatever. And then it's just can I catch Chris doing this right or wrong, and then make it awkward or make him nervous, and then give him this feedback? Or there's this, hey, Chris, right, as a part of your training and in our vision of creating the best kind of customer service possible, I want you and I to spend some time tomorrow working through and practicing on how we engage our customers, right? Are you aware of what those expectations are? Are you aware of our unique approach that we take to engaging with customers? Let's walk through that a little bit. Okay, here's the materials. Here's what's going on. This is what I want us to spend time with doing tomorrow. So take some time to kind of go through it all, and we'll go through it. Do you have any questions? No, I don't. Okay, would you like to see what I think this could look like? Okay, awesome. Let me show you. Let me show you what I think, how this looks great. Because what I actually want Chris to do tomorrow is succeed. Yeah. What I actually want him to do is do it 100% right. What I want him to do is feel confidence. I want him to feel great about it. I want us to be done. And for me to say, Chris, amazing job. I'm so happy with this. I knew we selected you for the right reasons. So excited to have you on the team. Now that I've validated that you can do this, you know what I want you to do? I want you to do this with every customer that we have. And that becomes the expectation, right?
Right. I know you can do it now. You've shown me you can. Now do it.
Exactly. So that's the end game, right? The end game is I want to give Chris the answers to the test. I want you to be successful. I want you to know what you're going to do. I want you to practice with me and not practice on a customer, right? And so we can work through this. But again, is that, to your point with the analogy, are we trying to slow down traffic to make it safer? Or are we trying to catch people doing something to increase revenue and teach them a lesson, right? And I will always say that the right way to do quote unquote surveillance or whatever we want to call it is to let you know up front, this is exactly what's going on, and this is why I'm doing it. And the goal of this is to help you become better at what you do. So this is really all about you. And I want you to feel confident, and I want you to ask questions, and I want you to know that this is actual practice, so that you can get in some of the things that you want to try that might work, that might not work. This is about us working together to build skill.
Right. Or let me give you the opposite outcome, which is that you go through that role play, even after saying everything you just said. The answers to the test are given, all the questions are asked, and then you go through it, and there are shortcomings, right? How you deal with those shortcomings is equally as important as how you set up what the surveillance process is to begin with. If how you deal with the shortcomings is, okay, I'll give you a week to figure this out, we're going to do it again, we're going to have to talk about this more in depth if you can't do this a week from now. Or is it, okay, I love what you did here, here, and here. Here's where I would make changes. Try it again on me. Let's do it again. Because at the end of the day, it's practice in order to get the desired result. If your desired result is that you want Chris to leave the organization because you are so confident that he will never, meet these expectations, that you just want him gone, then by all means, keep doing that. Keep trying to catch the person doing the wrong thing if that's the desired outcome. But if the desired outcome is for the person to be with the organization and to do well at the organization, it has to be from the standpoint of helping them succeed. I think about one of the most common complaints in employee engagement surveys, and I've administered them for years, is employees saying that what's frustrating to them is they feel like they're working really hard, they're doing a good job, and that their coworkers who are not doing a good job aren't being held accountable, right? Now, first of all, accountability is a tough one to make sure your employees know that their coworkers are being held accountable without publicly holding people accountable, because there's an element of privacy there too. And there are leaders who know how to do this very, very well. But if an employee is saying, I want my coworkers to be held accountable, Well, how do you think you hold people accountable without having raw data to know objectively what the expectation is and how everybody on the team is matching up to it? If an employee is saying, you need to be watching this person because they're not doing their job, but now I'm incensed when you want to watch me, it's like, well, what are you saying? Well, I know how to do my job well. Well, yeah, but how do I know that you know how to do your job well? Well, you've seen me do it. Yeah, exactly. I've seen you do it. I'm watching, right? Yeah. And so those two items are incongruous. You can't hold people accountable and give the expectation to your high performing people that the low performers are being held accountable without some level of this monitoring or surveilling or whatever you want to call it. The only way to do that is through this process. Are you doing it in the open? Are you doing it in a way that says the answers to the test are posted on the wall? Let's get here together. Or do your employees feel like they can be caught because you're peering around from a corner? That's where kind of the rubber meets the road here on whether these processes are done right or not done right.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, for this episode's 1 minute hack, here's what I want you to do. Get out your pen and paper, and I want you to write down all the ways in which you or your organization does any type of monitoring of employees, whether this is remote work, hybrid work, or in-office work. And it could be these kind of nuanced ways of you walking through the office to make sure somebody's at their desk, to surveying an interaction between a customer and employee, to live camera feeds on an employee's work from home laptop. Every single way where the behavior that is expected of an employee is validated through some type of surveilling. Write all those ways down, and then I want you to have a conversation with every single one of your people to make sure that they know all of those these things that are being done to them, these things that are being done to ensure productivity. Make sure you answer all the questions they might have about them, and make sure that you explain why they're being done and what the kind of the ramifications are. Is somebody actually sitting there looking at a keystroke log every single day? Or does it start with the generation of a report that shows productivity, and the people who are in the bottom 10% of productivity, then those logs are looked at? Like, be very, very transparent with how every one of these things is being used. If the goal is to make sure that the behavior changes and is in line with what the expectation is, if that's the goal, there needs to be 100% clarity and transparency between you and your employees about these methods. And it can never be kind of sold to them as, well, I don't want to do this, but my boss is making me do this. No, if your job is to ensure their productivity, this is you who is doing it, and it will be looked upon as you doing it from their perspective. So you need to own it as their leader.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack, and I've never been a fan of borrowing the authority and being like, it's not me, it's somebody above me, and that's what they want. Like, no, we've all signed up for this journey. We're all in this together. This is how we do things here, and I want to be clear about it. That way, if you have any questions or that type of thing, we can talk about these things. But let's talk about the intent and why these things are put in place to begin with, and what the expectation is, and if there are any issues or anything that's going on, that's why I want to have open communication about it. Because you know what happens sometimes? Softwares don't work. Things don't happen like they're supposed to. If you're a remote worker, you lose power, you lose internet. These things happen. And instead of waiting to be questioned about this, when you know that there are systems in place to check for these things, communicate it ahead of time. Let us know in real time what's going on. Make an effort to show that these things are happening. Similarly, when we get into things like in the retail space, if we're going to do this role play the next day, like we talked about earlier in the episode, say things like, okay, hey, yes, please, can you show me? I have questions. This is what I think I'm comfortable in. This is where I think I could use some help, right? Or I like the way that you did that. Can I get some more practice? Like, the idea here, again, to Chris's point earlier, is like, are we looking to build a culture and an environment that's helpful, that's motivating, that's inspiring, that's about helping our people to become more successful? Or are we at a place where we just want to trying to catch them doing something wrong so that we can move people out of the business? And then usually when you fall into that trap, here's what ends up happening. You're only looking for the bad things and people that you don't like. That's what ends up happening. And then you make excuses for, or you turn a blind eye to those people that you like that are also doing the wrong behaviors, which just completely shatters culture. So it really is about being consistent, being transparent, And again, if you're a leader looking to build a culture in a great place positively, you also need to like share the times when you've made a mistake, or when maybe you've looked at the wrong things, or made a misjudgment or a miscalculation based upon a data without asking the employee what was going on, and made some assumptions. Like, share those examples as well, because I think it's important for people to realize that we're all human, and leaders can make those mistakes, and like that you don't want to repeat that mistake. I don't want to repeat the mistake of assuming that if you're not doing the thing that I'm asking you to do, is because you don't want to. You may need some help, or you may need some training, and I want to know those things so that I can help you be successful in role.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a Reddit post I saw a long time ago now, and I think I may have mentioned it on the podcast before, of a person who said that they realized that they were being monitored with a keystroke logger on their work from home, and they realized that if they put a book down on their space bar while having Microsoft Word open, and it just had the space bar down the entire time, they were getting accolades from their work, because all their bosses were doing was looking at the number of times a key was pressed versus the number of hours worked, and the productivity was skyrocketing for this employee, and no one bothered to check any of the work. No one bothered to check what was being done. It was purely looking at a report, and all that did was tell every employee, oh, this system can be gamed. So regardless of what type of systems you use in place, if you're going off of just whatever that system is telling you, you're already doing the wrong thing. Those systems need to be a way of validating something that you suspect from looking at the work itself. Are they turning in the right work? Are they being productive in general from a standpoint of what they're producing? And if the answer is no, then you go back and look at those things. If all you do is look at what that log is, you'll just teach your employees how to game the system. You won't teach them how to actually change their behavior. So you can't be lazy here when it comes to being a leader. You have to actually do the work and then use these systems as what they are, just a tool for validation, not the end all be all of how you lead your team.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.